In the realm of human interactions, it is not uncommon to encounter situations where we feel inexplicably exhausted or depleted after spending time with certain individuals. Often labeled as energy vampires, these individuals can leave us feeling drained, stressed, or burdened. Yet, an important dimension of this phenomenon is often overlooked. We allow them to drain our energy. Personal energy is an intangible yet potent force that shapes our emotional, mental, and even physical states. Often referred to in holistic or spiritual contexts, personal energy can be understood more practically as the mental and emotional resources we have available at any given time. These resources dictate how we perceive and respond to the world, determining our levels of resilience, creativity, motivation, and emotional balance. When someone drains our energy, they essentially tap into these resources, leaving us feeling depleted or off balance. This process does not necessarily involve a deliberate, malicious act. Instead, it may result from unspoken expectations, patterns of communication, or emotional baggage. What is crucial to recognize is that our energy is, in many ways, under our jurisdiction. We can permit or deny access to these resources based on the boundaries we set and the ways we respond to emotional demands. Though modern psychology does not typically use the term energy in a literal sense, it acknowledges the effect of exhausting interactions on mental health. Neurobiological responses to stress, such as the release of cortisol and adrenaline, can deplete our mental resources. Persistent stress or conflict can thus leave us feeling exhausted, heightening our susceptibility to others' influence. By acknowledging our role in regulating our own emotional and mental energy, we assume responsibility for deciding how much of ourselves we invest in our relationships, and how we protect ourselves from undue depletion. The phenomenon of energy vampires. The term energy vampires is often used colloquially to describe people who leave us feeling drained. They might be coworkers who constantly complain, friends who only focus on their problems, or family members who critique and dismiss our feelings. While the label may seem dramatic, it highlights a real social phenomenon. Certain interactions demand more emotional labor than others, whether through conflict, negativity, or constant neediness. However, focusing solely on the energy vampire narrative can obscure our role in the dynamic. We might implicitly absolve ourselves of responsibility, seeing the other person as the sole cause of our fatigue. Although it is true that some individuals have traits or behaviors that are challenging, like narcissistic tendencies, chronic pessimism, or manipulative tactics, how we respond remains within our sphere of influence. Recognizing that we allowed this drain does not mean blaming the victim or dismissing the emotional toll of toxic relationships. It means acknowledging our capacity to regulate our boundaries, expectations, and responses. If we consistently feel sapped of energy around someone, there is a choice to be made, either to adjust how we interact with that person or to reevaluate the significance of that relationship. Shifting from passive victimhood to proactive agency is the first step in reclaiming our energy and well-being. The subtle dynamics of unhealthy interactions. Unhealthy interpersonal dynamics often unfold subtly, rooted in unspoken beliefs about what we owe one another in relationships. For instance, we might believe that a good friend should be endlessly available, or that conflict is to be avoided at all costs. These beliefs, if left unexamined, can cause us to overextend ourselves emotionally. We might find ourselves listening for hours to a friend's problems without receiving empathy in return, or constantly apologizing to a coworker who is easily offended. Over time, such patterns create a lopsided flow of emotional exchange. The other person, knowingly or not, becomes accustomed to receiving our time, attention, and sympathy. We, in turn, slip into a passive acceptance of that role, thus allowing the drain. Sometimes, underlying this dynamic is a fear of being perceived as selfish or unkind if we pull back. In other cases, there may be a deeper psychological pattern of seeking external validation or acceptance that compels us to always say yes. Such dynamics can eventually spiral, manifesting in chronic stress, anxiety, or even resentment. This trajectory underscores why acknowledging our participation in these relationships is crucial. By recognizing our own motives, whether it's a need for approval, a fear of conflict, or an entrenched belief about being nice, we can start to unravel the roots of these unhealthy interactions. Awareness paves the way for setting healthier boundaries that reinforce mutual respect and restore our equilibrium. Boundaries, the first line of defense. One of the most pivotal aspects of preventing energy depletion is the establishment of healthy boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define where our responsibility ends and another person's begins. Contrary to what we might fear, boundaries are not walls that shut people out. Rather, they serve as guidelines for acceptable behavior and interaction. They clarify our limits, communicate our needs, and reinforce mutual respect. When we lack clear boundaries, we inadvertently permit others to overstep our emotional and mental space. This can manifest as constant phone calls at inconvenient times, excessive demands for advice, or one-sided conversations that revolve entirely around the other person's woes. We might feel guilty for saying no, falsely believing that being available 24/7 is a measure of our worth or kindness. Enforcing boundaries requires courage and clarity. We must learn to articulate our limits without aggression or apology, reassuring the other person that we value the relationship but also need to safeguard our well-being. This might mean stating explicitly, "I'm not available to talk about this right now," or "I can listen for 10 minutes, but then I need to get back to work." Though initially uncomfortable, these clarifications prevent misunderstanding and resentments from festering. Ultimately, clear boundaries are a potent antidote to energy drainage, allowing us to interact more authentically and productively with others. The role of people-pleasing and codependency. A major factor in allowing others to drain our energy is a tendency toward people-pleasing or codependency. People-pleasing involves prioritizing others' happiness and comfort above our own, to the extent that we disregard or minimize our needs. Codependency is a related concept, typically describing a relationship dynamic in which one person's sense of self-worth is entangled with catering to or controlling another person's needs. In such dynamics, we find it daunting to disappoint or displease someone. We may fear conflict, rejection, or abandonment. This fear can be so strong that we'd rather let someone encroach on our boundaries than risk saying no. Over time, we become accustomed to relinquishing our energy, convincing ourselves that it is our duty or that we somehow deserve less. People-pleasers often mistake self-sacrifice for kindness or love, but true kindness respects both parties' well-being. Likewise, codependency often arises from a place of caring, but it ultimately traps both individuals in a cycle of neediness and control. The codependent caretaker feels validated by being needed, while the other person becomes reliant and manipulative. Recognizing these patterns can be a wake-up call, prompting us to reclaim our autonomy and energy by finding healthier ways to express compassion and support. Fear of conflict and the nice person syndrome. Fear of conflict is another subtle reason why we allow people to drain our energy. Many of us grow up internalizing the belief that conflict is inherently negative, disrespectful, or destructive. As a result, we might do anything to avoid disagreement or confrontation. This includes silently tolerating behavior that oversteps our boundaries. We may present a smiling, compliant facade even when we feel uncomfortable or taken advantage of. While avoiding conflict may temporarily preserve harmony, it often leads to long-term damage. Resentment accumulates beneath the surface, eroding our sense of authenticity and self-worth. We might become passive-aggressive, lashing out in indirect ways, or we might simply burn out from giving too much. In reality, conflict, when handled constructively, can be an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding. Voicing our concerns respectfully does not make us bad or mean. It signifies self-respect and honesty. By reframing conflict as a chance to clarify needs, learn about each other's perspectives, and reach mutually beneficial solutions, we can break free from the nice person syndrome that keeps us stuck. In so doing, we regain control of our emotional energy and reduce opportunities for unnecessary draining. Attachment to external validation. Often, we allow others to drain our energy because we crave their approval or validation. Humans are social creatures, wired for connection and acceptance. However, when our self-worth becomes excessively tethered to external feedback, we become vulnerable to manipulative or demanding individuals. We may bend over backward to gain a few words of praise or fear losing someone's approval if we fail to meet their expectations. This reliance on external validation can manifest in many forms: a desire to be seen as helpful, intelligent, or caring, a reluctance to appear selfish, or an obsession with maintaining a positive public image. In all cases, the underlying anxiety is that if we do not comply with demands, we risk judgment or rejection. Overcoming this attachment involves turning inward and nurturing self-acceptance. Instead of seeking external reassurance, we learn to validate our own feelings, abilities, and worth. This process can be challenging, as it may require confronting deep-seated insecurities or repressed emotions. Yet, by anchoring our sense of self in our own intrinsic value, we release the need to please everyone around us. This newfound inner security creates a natural barrier against energy depletion, because we no longer place ourselves at the mercy of others' whims or opinions. Psychological mechanisms behind energy drain. From a psychological standpoint, the draining of energy can be explained by mechanisms such as emotional contagion, cognitive overload, and social exchange theory. Emotional contagion refers to the way emotions can be caught like a virus. When someone close to us is stressed, angry, or anxious, we might mirror these states unconsciously. If we do not maintain emotional boundaries, we absorb their negativity, leaving us exhausted. Cognitive overload happens when our mental resources are spread too thin. Constantly responding to another person's demands or negativity consumes attention and mental energy. This is especially true in situations that require empathy, problem-solving, or conflict resolution. Ultimately, with insufficient downtime to recharge, we become overwhelmed. Social exchange theory posits that human interactions are partly based on cost-benefit analyses. If a relationship constantly demands emotional labor without providing sufficient positive return, be it affection, reciprocity, or respect, we experience a net loss of energy. While these are theoretical models, they highlight our agency. By understanding how these psychological processes operate, we can recognize when a relationship is siphoning more energy than it contributes, prompting us to recalibrate boundaries or even let go. Communication skills and assertiveness. Many of the reasons why we allow people to drain our energy boil down to inadequate communication skills and a lack of assertiveness. Assertive communication is the ability to express our needs, desires, and boundaries openly and confidently while still respecting the rights and feelings of others. It occupies the middle ground between passive submission and aggressive confrontation. Without assertiveness, we default to passivity, suppressing our needs to avoid conflict or rejection. Alternatively, we might swing to aggression if we feel cornered for too long, lashing out to reclaim our sense of control. Neither approach resolves the root issue. Both can inadvertently encourage others to keep draining our energy. Assertiveness training involves learning how to say no without guilt, how to make direct and respectful requests, and how to handle criticism or disagreement. It also includes body language, tone of voice, and word choice. By practicing assertiveness, we shift from seeing ourselves as victims of others' demands to active participants in shaping our interactions. Over time, assertiveness fosters healthier, more balanced relationships, reducing the likelihood that people will, even inadvertently, exploit our energy. The impact of empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion are virtues often associated with draining interactions. After all, caring about others' needs and emotions can make us more susceptible to carrying their burdens. However, empathy and compassion, when combined with boundaries, become powerful forces for positive connection rather than drains on our energy. Empathy allows us to understand someone's feelings, but it does not mean we must internalize them. Compassion motivates us to help relieve suffering, but not at the cost of our own well-being. This balance, sometimes referred to as detached empathy or compassionate detachment, allows us to remain caring without becoming enmeshed in another's emotional world. Practicing compassionate detachment involves recognizing where our responsibility ends and another's begins. We can offer support, listen actively, or provide guidance without absorbing their emotional states. This approach fosters healthier, more sustainable relationships and ensures we do not sacrifice our energy in the process of caring for others.